Whenever I get the itch to play a new fighting game, I like to dabble in the ones I've never put any serious time into first, and that's what led me to trying out the very first Guilty Gear this week. Now, I played a little bit of Strive when that beta came out all those years ago, but I've never taken the time to try out any of the other games for some reason. Well, I know the reason. I was stuck in that liminal void of, I'll get to it at some point. Which is so silly because these games are so my kind of crazy, over-the-top, bombastic action with thought-provoking ideas of existentialism, faith, and what it means to fight for what you believe in. Only to have that faith shaken by some cold, hard truths. That perfect mix of, hey, that sword looks sick, met with, oh, he wanted to destroy the world because the only thing he believes he can do is be the weapon he was forced to become, instead of looking beyond those shackles and realizing that he can become anything he wants to be. Guilty Gear has always been nagging away at the back of my brain. I love how hyper over-the-top presentation in these games are, from the music to the action and the insanity of the story that I've only gleaned bits and pieces about over the years. And if you've learned anything about me through the videos on this channel, I love shit that is so over the top and weird. Give me more dumb, edgy stuff in my games so I can get my fix, please. See, I'm someone that likes stuff that looks cool, even if it may not fit into the rule set of the world said cool stuff is occupying. And yes, I will eventually make some kind of video talking about how the Twin Snakes is exactly what I mean here. All of Guilty Gear's cool shit is intrinsically a part of its identity. Anything that this series could do is accepted to be a Guilty Gear thing, and that is so cool. There aren't many things that get such a wide pass on this sort of thing with most people. Anyway, hit the intro. Yeah. Music has a big part to play in Guilty Gear, with each character having their own themes that accentuate their characteristics. Soul's theme opens up with this tasty guitar solo and then morphs into this confident, brash-sounding rock song. Kai's theme befits his status as part of a holy order by beginning with an organ, famed cool religious instrument, but then shifting into a much more melodic song than Soul's theme while still keeping that grunge rock vibe, perhaps pointing out how similar the two are even though they oppose each other as rivals. Music comes through in other ways too though, from the options menu being dominated by this built-in jukebox that allows you to listen to all of the main themes from the game, to the announcer beginning each match with Many of the characters here are also musical references in themselves, with Soul Bad Guy being a reference to Freddie Mercury, which that was a rabbit hole I did not expect to go down. The fact that series creator Daisuke Ishiwatari, who also happens to be an illustrator, composer, and voice actor for Soul himself through some of the games, loves Queen to the degree of making a big reference and slapping it into his fighting game is awesome. Such a neat way of honoring something you love and showing it off loud and proud for the players that take the time to learn more about this world. And I think it speaks to a certain level of enthusiasm that's present from the moment you boot up Guilty Gear. There's also something to be said about the aesthetic of cool grunge, where vivid colors, bright character designs, and a certain edginess joins together to form something grimy and cool as hell, where the mixture of the dirt and bombastic form an unholy bond. And I'm not really sure what else could fit in this genre melting pot. Guilty Gear obviously, but I'm also thinking of stuff like Trigun, maybe? Or maybe even Chainsaw Man if we wanted a modern pick. It's a pretty wide box, so I'm sure there's other stuff that could go in there, but this is one of my favorite kinds of aesthetics. So disharmonious on paper that it ends up coming together so well. Like, hey, maybe this mud would look sick if we, I don't know, chuck some red paint on it, and it does! Now, I sort of dove straight into my first playthrough with Kai Kisuke, and everything just clicked into place. I come from Tekken as my main fighting game, so I always expect there to be hours of practicing combos before I have any real fun. but there's not much to learn here outside of the specials, and even they are just simple quarter circle or half circle inputs. And thanks to the Gatling combo system letting you combine any of the 4 basic moves into on-the-spot strings, it all feels pretty damn tight. Every character has their nuances too, but in terms of just diving straight in and seeing what's what, I had a surprisingly easy time acclimating to it all, which isn't to say that I had an easy time overall. The first Guilty Gear is a mess in terms of balancing, very aggressive AI, and mechanics that seem to go against everything I know about fighting games. Nearly every character has an insta-kill attack where the screen flashes red and you need to perform a certain input to defeat the opponent. To counter this, the opponent needs to press their insta-kill input in the opposite direction before the attacking player does theirs. But if this move lands, the attacker wins every round of the match. They just take home the win right there and then, even if it's right at the start of the very first round. And that is an absolutely bonkers mechanic to throw into your fighting game. On the one hand, I love it. On the other hand, the shit is a bit silly. There's no real incentive for not just spamming this out until you're able to land it, and the AI doesn't make that easy for sure. But even if you fail to land the attack, I've noticed that the AI sometimes struggles to decide what to do next, so you can just mash out some attacks and usually land quite a few of them. I won't lie though, this is usually how I beat Justice, because this fight is kind of insane. He hasn't got a ton of moves to throw out or anything, and they're easy enough to dodge or block, but they do so much damage that you'll eventually get chipped down and die before you can make the most of the openings you've gained. I called Justice a he just then, by the way, which might be confusing to some because I've heard Justice is a her in the future. The manual also states that Justice is a he, so I guess at this point he technically is in this Western release, but I assume there was probably some kind of mistranslation along the way. Now, I have no idea if insta-kills are a thing that stays after this game, but I would hope that they get pretty heavily changed if they do, because between me spamming them and the AI spamming them, it's hard to see how they could be much fun 5 games in. But for now, they are a fun novelty, and honestly, it's hilarious to see me and the AI trying our best to get this shit through the door. I do wonder though, if there was like an honor code back when this game was out in the competitive scene. Did players just handshake and promise not to try to insta-kill each other? I mean, sure, there is a way of defending against it, but it's still a pretty limp way of winning the fight if you do manage to land it the 3rd or 4th time. A part of me does still find it hilarious though. The pace of the fighting itself is breakneck, but that's balanced by the matches themselves lasting a decent while. There are 2 health bars stacked on top of the other, and health doesn't go down as quick as you may expect, which leads to matches going on for a pretty long time if you're playing pretty slowly, to the point that running down the timer can be a thing that happens pretty often. Matches aren't so long that things start to get boring, but long enough for the ebb and flow of the match to change as it goes on. You may start off a round by getting your ass kicked, but get into a rhythm and find the moments to beat your opponent back before the end, or vice versa. If you get caught in a long string of combos, it isn't the end of the world, since you should have enough room to bounce back, until you do get your shit pushed all the way in. Guilty Gear's story is a fairly run-of-the-mill tournament full of quirky characters from all walks of life that are here to win a prize. It being that the winner can make one wish and it will come true. But then you read the rest of the manual and realize that there's a lot more going on here than you first thought. Fighting games are no stranger to hiding pretty grand storylines in their manuals and 40-second character endings, but Guilty Gear's backstory is dense, with a history that goes back 100 years and details the fall of technology and rise of magic. And instead of solving the Earth's environmental and warring conflicts, it just created new issues to be wary of. Like the Gears, humans crossed with animal DNA that were used as slaves until a sentient gear named Justice rose up and took the fight to their creators, sparking a century of conflict that ended with Justice's imprisonment and most Gears being put to death, with any surviving Gears likely being forced to live in secrecy. This is a lot of story to tell in a game that doesn't really devote much time to telling it, and that's not for a lack of trying either. After every fight in the main arcade mode, you'll get a bit of dialogue unique to who you're fighting as and who it's against. And alright, Sol, alright. Cluing us into relationships and dynamics that don't reveal themselves until you've gone through the mode a couple of times. Then you get a big ending cutscene to see the direct aftermath of Justice's defeat. Some are played for laughs, but others contain huge revelations for the characters, like how Sol is a gear Gear himself, the prototype Gear in fact, or how Kai's faith in the idea of justice is questioned by the physical manifestation of justice in the end. There are some funny endings too though, like how Axel Lowe, who is a time traveler by the way, but not by his own choice, defeats justice and realizes he's stuck in the future. But just as he comes to terms with this and prepares to find new meaning in this world, he assumedly blips back to a different time period. Or May's ending where she finally reunites with Johnny, who we hear about constantly, only for Johnny to seemingly be a bit of a piece of shit. Sure, the actual content of the game's storytelling might be lacking in the usual places that a fighting game usually falls victim to, but the effort here to make every character feel as unique as possible in their mannerisms, gameplay, and writing is what makes this world stand out. I feel like the goal for a fighting game never needs to be about delivering on a dense storyline, because that's not really feasible with the usual arcade mode run through. And if I'm being completely honest, I think fighting game stories became less interesting when they evolved to being 6-hour cutscene movies that I watch on YouTube on the day they release. For me, part of the fun with fighting games like Guilty Gear is running through all the character stories to see how these people interact with each other, seeing all their endings play out to understand what the consequences of their goals are, and then diving into external material, like the manual, to gain more information about the world at play. This way, the core experience in the game isn't compromised by having to tell a story it doesn't have the bandwidth to tell, and those that want to delve into the inner workings of this world are welcome to do so. Plus, I think having to connect the dots yourself is a more interesting experience than being told a story that's pretty cut and dry. Excelling in the gameplay requires a certain level of devotion and experimentation, and figuring out what the hell the story is trying to say is an equally devoted act by the end. After reading up and experiencing what Guilty Gear 1 has to offer, I really like what I see. In a match, I'm constantly curious about trying out different tactics and combos, rewarded by the game acknowledging these moments with gamble or counter appearing on the screen, calling out close calls or moments where the tide is turning to accentuate those highs and lows. That excitement then being met with brutal difficulty and some strange balancing choices reminds me how this game is still the first step in a big series, which only endears me to this experience even more. Is Guilty Gear a great fighting game? Yes, absolutely. It's just not one that plays fair most of the time. And that's either something bold and brave or annoying, depending on how you view things, or really where the cards fall on you getting an insta-kill off or not. I can't say that this is where you should start your journey with Guilty Gear, but I can say I don't regret that it's where I've started mine. And it being as fun and interesting as it is only gets me more excited to see where the rest of this franchise goes. End this on a joke. Guilty Gear, more like innocent cog, am I right?